Hello friends and welcome to my tutorial on how to paint a dog eye. I've put a link in the description of the photo I used as a reference to create this painting, so be sure to check that out if you would like to paint along with me. This painting actually took me more than an hour to create, but I've sped it up so I can guide you through the process, so please pause wherever you need to. Step 1 is the sketch. I first start off the drawing with the outline of the eye, so here I'm drawing the eye shape, making sure to draw the tear duct. Then I draw out the iris of the eye. Once I'm happy with the first part of the sketch, I start to draw out the eyelid. Then I begin to draw the lightest part of the eye, which is the white reflection that is seen in the reference image. Following from this, I draw the darkest part of the eye, which is the pupil. In the reference image, I noticed that the iris is darker towards the middle, so I drew a guideline so when I came to paint it, I knew roughly where that was. I then draw the outer part of the eye, which I noticed on the reference image where there is no fur. And then I just shaded the pupil to differentiate it from the iris circle that I drew earlier. Step 2 is to prepare the paints. Here I'm using black, brown, white and the primary colours in acrylic. Step 3 is to paint the darkest areas of the eye. I start by using the black to colour in the pupil. I then use the black to colour in the shadow above the eye. I noticed the reference photo also shows dark areas around the iris, so I painted around the iris too. Step 4 was to block in the paint and the fur areas. For this step I mixed black and brown and a little bit of white paint to create a brown, as the dog's underlying skin colour for most of the reference is a relatively dark brown. I then use a medium-sized brush to paint all of the darker areas of the skin that I see. If you look at the reference photo, there is also areas of lighter fur. So I used the brown colour that I mixed earlier and added a little bit of yellow, red and white to create a lighter orangey brown to paint the lighter areas of fur. I also noticed a really dark area of skin towards the bottom of the reference, so I mixed black and brown to paint this area too. Step 5 was to block paint the eye area. I begin by mixing red, yellow and a little bit of brown to create this orange iris colour. I then paint all of the iris with this colour using my drawing as a guide. To paint the tear duct and the edges of the eye, I mixed white, red and a little bit of brown. I also added a little bit more white to the mixed colour so I could create some colour variation. Then this completes the whole page to be coloured in as a good base for our next steps. Step 6 is to add the highlights and the shadow to the iris. I begin by using the black-brown paint we mixed earlier by adding some white to it so I can paint out the highlight at the bottom of the eye. I also noticed a blue tinge to the highlight, so I mixed white and a little bit of black and added this to the highlight also. Then I mixed some brown, black and white to paint the darker portion of the iris, making sure to avoid painting over the highlights. I then used white to go over the parts of the bottom highlight and define the top highlight. I mixed white, red and yellow to create a lighter yellowy orange to paint the lighter flecks seen in the iris, being sure to paint in the direction of the flecks that I see. I then mixed red, brown and yellow to paint the dark edge of the iris. Then I mixed another lighter orange to define some more flecks on the eye, particularly on the boundary of where the darker part of the iris is. I then added some white to the tear duct to add some highlights, and added a little bit of brown to the top of the iris. Step 7 is to work around the eye. So I begin by painting a very thin white line on the outer edge of the eye as a highlight, which makes the eye look wet. I then mix a very dark brown to go directly underneath this line to create a contrast and show some more depth. I then go back to the white and I add some white dots and dashes underneath the eye. As you'll see in the reference, this part of the skin is reflecting light. Additionally, I go in with the light brown and repeat the process around the eye as the highlights in these areas aren't as bright. Following this step, I mix a dark brown and I begin to give the shadows of the top of the eye a little bit more definition, as well as the shadows around the tear duct. I then add a light brown to the outer area of the skin by the tear duct. I mix a light grey for the outer edges of the iris. And I go over the highlights of the eye once more with white. I then use a very light, almost white brown to go around the darker edges of the iris to help with the blending of the iris. Step 8 is to blend the fur. I use white, red, yellow and a little bit of black to create a warm yellow colour, and I paint the lighter areas of the fur. You'll notice I start with the base of each fur strand, holding my brush closer to the paper initially and then gradually lifting my paintbrush to create a flick. I then use the white to paint some lighter strands of fur. I then go in with the brown to create some shadier parts of the fur. I then repeat the same process for the lower part of the lighter shade of fur, starting off with the warm yellow and then going in with the darker strands of fur. I then use black for the darkest fur strands around the eye and then add white to also create some highlights. I then mix in a bit more white into the warm yellow that I made earlier to add some more fur strands. So the eye is looking pretty good now, so it's on to the final step. Step 9, adding the final details. I use a light brown to go back with dots and dashes to define the skin texture underneath the eye. I then add a few more strands of fur with the yellow, some lighter flecks of light brown to add some more skin texture. Then I add some white to the tear duct, parts of the iris and highlights around the eye. I then darken up some areas around the perimeter of the iris and mix a lighter brown for the edge of the iris. I then went back with the white for some more highlight work. Then I created a really dark brown for the darkest part of the iris to give some more definition. A final stroke of white where the iris meets the bottom lid, and then finally a few spots of orange on the iris. And there you have it, the finished painting. If you would love to see more tutorials, be sure to let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this painting, be sure to check out this video.